Welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now, your hosts, the ones we call Michael and Margaret. It's Michael and Margaret Lines.
It's like an echo lead.
Yes, I love it.
I feel bad saying that I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And she's Margaret. And
yes. We are going to have a very interesting show tonight, people. Just be ready.
Well, it's been a minute.
Mm.
You know, we were on, we went away for a little while. And then we got out on probation. And then we had some bizarre computer problems.
It just wasn't meant to be that night. Who knows? I think maybe that was one of the nights that the solar CMEs were hitting the Earth.
Could have been. And now, right now,
in this moment,
we're going to have a show in the moment of now, about the moment of now.
Well, I think it all started with the question of how now. Sorry, my head.
Brown cow.
I know that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Well, you started it. I wasn't going to say it. And then you said, ha, 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 my head. I'm like, okay.
All right. Reset.
Okay. Take two.
Understanding what the moment of now actually is, or the word now, because we think we know what now is. And we use the word very easily in the English language. But there are different ways of looking at now. And that is what we decided would be a good discussion.
And it also kind of... we're going to refer back to Tolle and the Power of Now, and this is his seminal and famous work from now, about 2 decades or more, maybe 3 decades ago, in which he chronicles, in some ways, his revelatory experience, his awakening, and his realization of the power of now. And just succinctly, I'm sure everyone who listens is probably somewhat familiar with Tolle, but for those who may not be, his central revelatory experience was that human beings, himself really included, and primarily, are subject to suffering in large part because they aren't living in the moment of now.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, how can you help it? Well, the problem is very often people find great temptation, I'll say, and even encouragement to live in anywhere else except the moment of now. What does that really mean? It means this: if you are sitting on a park bench on a beautiful day, and you're miserable because you're remembering all the things that happened to you last year, or 2 years ago, or 20 years ago, and all the hurts and all the things that people did to you or took away from you, your losses, your regrets, you're not living in the moment of now. You're living in the past. And the past is all about regret and about remembering past grievances, loss, etc. Or you're sitting on that same park bench, beautiful day, and you're consumed with worry and anxiety about what's going to happen tomorrow, or 2 days from now, or a week from now, or a month from now. Oh, this is going to happen, and that one's going to do this, and I'm never going to get this promotion, and how can I pay these bills, and it goes on and on. You're not living in the moment now. And Margaret, what are you doing? You're suffering. You're causing suffering, but no one looks at it that way. You're literally thinking, well, I'm doing my best to figure it out, and I'm planning for the future, and I'm buying the insurance, and I'm worrying about what's going to happen, or I'm thinking about the past because I've got to remember those grievances, and I got to think about that loss, and I got to remember all the things that were done to me and all the people who did bad things. Never ever forgive them, ever.
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing about humans. We are the only animal on the earth, let's go there, that has imagination. In other words, we can imagine what could happen based on what we remember had happened. And it was a survival talent that humans had. We're also very mobile. So if it wasn't working in one spot, we can go someplace else. But when the imagined, what you're projecting, basically overrides what is actually happening in the moment, that's when there's a split in your consciousness that happens. Because what you're actually doing is focusing on thinking or imagining what could happen without sitting back and being able to take a third-person viewpoint, in other words, an objective viewpoint, and observing what is actually going on. And I believe it was Jordan Peterson who had said this, but they were discussing what they call modes of being. It's a mode of being. When you understand when you're looking at something, and a mode of being is a way in which you can begin to construct your world. In other words, man has a tendency to look at, say, an object, and that becomes the object of your attention. And then you begin to tack on it all these qualities or abilities that this thing has, this object. And it's a mode of being for you to touch back to the world. And it's a very interesting thing, because when you're dealing with looking at something and trying to understand what's going on, the tendency is to objectify it. You're not really being in that moment. You are objectifying it. In other words, what substance is this? What can I note? And that I find is fascinating, because you have to come back to an awareness of a being state. And it's a very fine line, truthfully, when you look at it. Because man has, and this is something from Jordan Peterson, man cannot distinguish between being itself and being conscience, or conscience being that your conscious speaking to you of whether or not you think it should have been done right or wrong. It's fascinating. So that's one of the, it's a very fine line, because that it's so easy to believe that because I'm right or I'm wrong, that is my being state. I am right or I am wrong. And you've got to learn how to distinguish between modes of being and modes of thinking, understanding what thinking is, and the mode of where your emotions come in. We are complex beings, very complex.
Well, and I think Peterson has an interesting take on it. But if I would relate that back to Tolle, and I think this is, I don't want to hesitate to say the deeper, but I think Peterson's is exactly correct. But I think Tolle would say that what's happening with the modes of being is that you are identifying. You are both objectifying, assigning attributes, assigning judgments, and then identifying, saying, I am right, or I think this is good,
yes,
or I think this is bad.
But it's that movement between that mode and then identification that gets blurred. People have a tendency just it's all done in one lump, and there is actually steps in between.
Well, what do you mean by steps in between?
Well, when you identify with something, you are actually giving a piece of yourself into that object.
Anime.
When you're observing it, you realize there is a separation.
That's exactly. So the steps. Okay. Maybe steps is sort of the wrong word for me, but what it is that people go immediately from observation to identification. That's my thing.
Right.
It's good. You're bad if you want to take my thing.
Right.
My thing is the best thing. All those things are identification. And when I have my thing, I'm better than you because I have my thing and you don't have my thing.
Or my way of doing things is better than your way of doing things.
Right, and you get all those abstractions. Then you can see where a being, a tabula rasa being, an infant perhaps, who's just come onto the world and in this new incarnation of spirit and soul into flesh, is very close to a pure being. When you look into the eyes of a newborn infant and they catch your attention, well, there's two things that happen, but very, very immediately, a lot of your being or a lot of your identifying, I am this, I am that, kind of shuts off. And you're connected to this other in a way which is wordless, somewhat timeless, non-judgmental, and you feel an attachment to this other, and it's really at the soul and heart level, but you don't have to objectify it even at that. You feel an attachment, you feel a connection, there's an energy transfer and a communication, and it's all non-verbal. It's either via gesture or just literally the attention of one to another, and you're immediately reminded of your own being, looking at this very innocent, new, pure incarnation of spirit into flesh. That moment of connection with an infant, people think of it as they want to do it. They feel happy. They feel blissful because all the other pieces of you, I got to pay my taxes next week piece, and that person last week who came into my office and annoyed the hell out of me, I really want to get them. All that goes to the side because that's all ego-based, identity-based, past, future, suffering, all that stuff. And that kind of is pierced, and you're in a being state. What Margaret was saying, the mode is now being. And the other, this somewhat innocent new life, is in some way intimately connected to that moment of now. You both are in it. You're both appreciating each other's uniqueness, yet your connection, yet our commonality and our connection to Source. You can put all that into words, and you can talk about it for 20 minutes and fill up an hour of a talk show. But it all happens in sort of an instant. And it doesn't even last very long, but it doesn't have to. You have an exchange of energy, of attention, a reminder of what you really are, and the echo of you see yourself immediately in that other, and that other sees themselves in you. But that the other thing you're getting, and people also get this from their pets, Margaret, is you're getting in the regard of a being who's living in the moment of now, because they don't have an idea of tomorrow or yesterday yet. They're egoless because they don't have an idea of an ego yet. This is good, this is bad. But they look at you and say, hey, wow, you're there, I'm there, this is cool. I love you, you love me. I just want to be with you for a second. And it's refreshing. And people say, wow, I just love holding babies. Or I love petting my dog or my cat. Because that's a being moment that reminds you of who you really are in the moment of now. Like, we were just talking about someone sitting on the park bench and miserable because they can't enjoy the day. But an infant walks, strolls by in a stroller, pushed by mom, and all of a sudden, the day is alive again. Oh, he's so cute. Or a dog comes by and walks up to you and just wants to sniff your hand and give you a lick and a pet. And whoa, and then for that moment, you're completely relieved of the fact that that you're facing a prison sentence next week or whatever it is, or that all these horrible things happen to you. You say, well, it's all of a sudden the day is wonderful and great. Why? Same day. Because you've relieved yourself of the burden of self-imposed, ego-driven suffering. And you become in the moment of now and say, wow, this is a great day. I saw a baby and a dog at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, the moment was opened to you.
That's a great way of putting it.
Because when you're shut in your head, you get very little input of the outside world, just enough not to bump into something.
And isn't it sort of the other way around? You opened yourself to the moment. But yes, the moment was also opened to you.
Well, unless it is a conscious decision, you don't open that door. Something has got to intrude and has had a pathway to touch into you. Otherwise, you just won't see it. You classify it as, okay, that's a tree I have to avoid. I'm still walking along this pathway.
And still suffering. This is a great point, which I think we should get into a little bit at some point during this conversation, is who opens that door? Because it's almost opened without volition. The door to the moment can suddenly open. And you don't, unless you do it consciously, it can happen sort of unconsciously and bring you into consciousness for a brief moment. But who opens the door? Isn't that interesting?
Frankly, you get to the point where you're sick and tired of yourself and you want to run away. So your eyes look up almost at any place or anything else, so you don't have to listen to you. So, look, it's a baby.
Well, I like that. So we've talked about this in the past, coming to the end of oneself, and in great suffering, you can come to that point where you come to the end of yourself, and you say, I can't do this anymore, but yet here I am still. But it doesn't have to take that. It can just take a sunrise, or an infant, or a puppy, to bring you into at least a moment, a breath of consciousness.
It's usually something that strikes a chord in your soul, whether it's beauty, like a sunrise, or a star-filled night, or gentle breeze, a scent, laughter.
Yeah.
Laughter breaks that whole thing up. Honestly, there's the mental machinations you got going. When you bring laughter into it, it's like, well, all right, we lighten the load, because it pretty much breaks apart the construct that you just put on your head. It's like a helmet that you put on your head.
Yeah.
The cone of silence just descends on your head, and all you're hearing is all these thoughts that you're twirling around, back and forth, spinning. And then suddenly, that's funny. So you start laughing. And the minute you laugh, it all just shatters.
Yeah, so joy does it.
And really what it is, the realization, if you think about it, that moment of being, you have looked at yourself and started laughing. Because you realize, I'm funny. I'm funny to me. That was silly.
That's Camus, the absurdity of man, the absurdity of life.
Well, if you have an appreciation of the absurdity.
Yeah. Well, his revelation was life is absurd, so you might as well live it anyway, instead of being a nihilist like Nietzsche. But back to the moment of now, and to that moment of laughter or joy, or as you mentioned, something beautiful that just it takes you out of yourself. But how does it? What does that mean exactly? Right? It takes off the helmet. I kind of like that analogy. This helmet, this thought helmet, which is kind of tightly binding you and telling you who you are and what you want to be and who you should be and what you were yesterday and what you're going to be tomorrow and all those things. And it's a little echo chamber, like a helmet, because when you speak inside of a very tight little space, all you hear is yourself. And there's mirrors in there, so you can only see the reflections of yourself, and they're kind of funhouse mirrors, if you will, because they're distorted. And all that is going on and keeping you kind of focused on you and focused on not the moment of now, but everything else, forward, past, up, down, what's going to happen, what's going to do this. So that helmet is removed, is broken. It's in a weird way like Plato's The Cave. You suddenly just get yanked out of the cave and into reality, into the moment of now. And I like it that it's joy or some sort of wonder, some sort of breathtaking beauty, something which is beyond words, generally speaking.
Because being is beyond words.
Being is beyond words. And something that reveals to you in the gentlest of way the absurdity of this helmet,
right?
of this very narrow, structured way of thinking about everything all the time and buying the insurance and all that stuff and worrying about all the stuff that could happen or regretting everything you could have had last week and the week, and 2 years ago and 10 years back, and if only this one hadn't done this to me, I wouldn't be like this today, and all that.
Well, I think it's fascinating that the society now basically doesn't encourage forgiveness. If anything, it wants to have this tally sheet that you're supposed to make note very carefully, the date, the time, the duration of when this offense has taken place. And you just keep tabs of it, and you could subdivide it into a whole bunch of different categories and different people. But that pretty much is the helmet that you're putting on your head.
It's a burden, a weight.
And you need to let it go. And letting go of all those offenses means that you have to forgive. And it's very interesting because there's a part that inside of you that says, no, I don't want to forgive. I was right. I don't want to forgive.
Ego.
Well, yes. But you have to acknowledge that it is happening. Most people just go into them to feel this, to feel that, and I have the resentment. And like, wait. Did you see the sequence that you just went through? Hanging on to that offense basically drags you right back into those horrible feelings of worthlessness and loneliness and rejection. And all that is based in the root of fear. If you can see that and acknowledge it, that's the first step. Because that's not who you are. But that is the junk that's spinning around in your helmet.
Yes. I'm reminded of, Scrooge and Marley of the chains. Everyone's familiar with Dickens' wonderful classic tale. And if you recall, the ghosts come to Scrooge, and one of them is his old partner. And he is wearing this terrible chain. Well, that's what we're talking about here, this chain. And he even says it very aptly right in the story, is I forged every link myself. And you are, with the ego, forging the links of your chain, the sections of your helmet, or the layers, if you will, perhaps, of this helmet that you're wearing, the burdens that you're carrying around, the suffering. It's all created by the ego as armor in some ways, Margaret. It is like armor. The ego armors itself with all these things to reinforce itself. It's always about me. Everyone's talking about me.
Well,
didn't you have that experience once where you were with a girl, I forget what it was, in high school perhaps, where she got very angry because she felt that everyone was talking about her, or that you and your friend were talking about her, and you were talking about nothing of the sort. But the ego says, "Oh, those two over there, they must be talking about me."
Right. Yeah, she was young, and you're in a lab, and you're trying to analyze certain reasons why a plant is failing at flourishing. It was a biology lab. And we were laughing because the teachers were stretching to get us to analyze, well, what are the reasons why a plant can fail? And one of them was like being pot bound. And it was this ridiculous example of this bound pot. It was so silly that we all burst into laughter. And when this girl saw us laughing, she immediately thought that it had to do with her. So she came over and she shoved me. Oh. And I just looked at her like, what? She goes, laughing at me. I was like, huh? We're laughing at that. You see that example? That's funny. Like, so she, at that moment, realized she had misinterpreted everything. And that's the problem that we all have. We think that little occurrences outside, I must be the center of this. This is the child, okay? Children always believe they are at the center of everything. That's why whenever there's activity going on, you see them set themselves up right in the middle of all the glide paths. Where the glide paths intersect, there they are. So when you realize that about yourself, that this is the child in you that is feeling that it wants to participate, but is feeling insecure. You, as the adult, the conscious adult, you almost have to parent that piece of you. You have to mother that piece. And it's like, okay, hon, no, it's okay. It's all right. They're laughing about that. It has nothing to do with you. You're loved. They're not trying to reject you or push you away. It's fine. And that baseline is what we all are looking for. To be comfortable in our skin. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it, I think. But that part of you that thinks the story is all about you, and we've talked about this with the little monk, is the way that you pierce that. Maybe a very good way of doing it is, as you say, you can mother yourself or parent yourself, perhaps, and realize that this ego piece is a small piece of you. It is truly, in some ways, childlike because it wants everything to be about it. So the conscious you, the you'd call it the adult you, but you see this behavior in people who are called adults, can say, well, no, the world, the way of looking at the world is that the world is not about you. That, in fact, nobody is really thinking about you because you are a unique and wonderful creation of the universe, of God. But so is everybody else. And no one's particularly concerned about you because we're all in some ways in this common dream, and we're all subject to this idea that the universe is about us. Well, and it's easy to get there because your individual perception and mine and everybody else's is carrying a universe around with us. We have a universe within us, the perception of it. You have your universe, someone else has theirs.
Right, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. It has to do with modes of being, how you put together your world.
How you put together your world. But let me finish that. I want to just kind of go back over what you said. This idea of parenting yourself, of making yourself conscious of the fact that, yes, your universe and the others are equal in many ways. They're certainly equally of value. But the intersection, what they're doing in their universe, and the joy, and I think that's what really set this particular thing in motion, the fact that you were having fun.
Right.
And that why are they, the child says, well, why are they having fun without me? They want to be involved. So they must be talking about me and excluding me and purposely making fun of me.
Right.
And that's, the ego loves that story because that story identifies the other. The other is everyone else who's talking about me and they don't like me. And then there's me who's right and pure and good and I don't deserve them talking about me, and I'm going to go over there and shove that girl for talking about me and having fun without me. Well, and you can see this in many ways. This little kind of sprite, or whatever you might want to call it, of ego rises up and says, why should this one have this thing when I should have it?
Why can't I? Why don't I have it?
Why don't I have it?
I'm going to just, if I can't have it, then no one should have it.
We've seen these things have played themselves through myth and fable for hundreds of thousands of years. Since we could start making up stories, we've made up stories. You mentioned earlier, in the earlier part of this half hour, that the human beings have this imagination. Well, part of it, or a lot of it, is concerned about with us, with all the stories of what we should have and how much better. We really don't deserve this, and this one over here, this one is bad, and they deserve the bad thing, and I don't, and I've been good, and so because I've been good, nothing bad can happen to me. All these things, when we went through what we went through with Christopher, the very first thing that you saw in others and in ourselves was, why me? And that's the ego saying, well, why not this one? This one's been bad. These people over here, they deserve it. I don't deserve it. I'm good. I've done all the right things. I've followed the rules. This shouldn't be me. Why me?
Well,
that's all that ego, again, saying, well, I'm special. And everybody else isn't, and I get to judge, and I get to control.
And that's the baseline of what we had seen in our society when we wound up doing the pediatric cancer center. All right, because people in general, they're in this state of, well, as long as I follow the rules, nothing bad should happen to me. Just give me the rules and I'll follow them. And that's all there is. And you're sitting there going, well, isn't that the pharisaical way of looking at life? You follow all these rules and you keep doing what your company wants you to do. You keep doing what your organization wants you to do. You keep doing what your classmates want you to do.
Your society wants you to do.
Right. Your culture. And then nothing bad will happen to you. That is the baited hook. And if you swallow that, and not, you basically have given over your power to think freely on your own. And that's when they start reeling you in, and you're going to be used as fodder for whatever this concept or organization has put the bait out for you. When you're capable, when you are actually sitting there going, no, I will not give in to this. And you're going to run up against a few conflicts by doing that, because you're going against the status quo. But when you see the status quo unfold in the cancer ward, it's fascinating, because the dividing line between what is real and what is projected, the way the society wants you to function, is so obvious. It's, again, a lot of the parents and grandparents, I don't know, they will wind up saying, I don't know why. Oh, I don't know why you have this. You've been good. And just repeating that over and over again, let me assure you, you have sympathy, you have compassion for them, because they're suddenly waking up realizing that the world doesn't work that way. But if you've given into it, you are controlled that way. Now, what matters? What matters for you in this moment? You're going to have to think on your own in order to try to save this child's life. Okay? Doesn't mean that you understand more than what the medical profession is, but you are taking into account the well-being of this little person that you love. So, when you watch this, that idea that, oh, you've been good, I don't know why this is happening to you. Do you realize what you're actually doing to the child when you say that? The kid's sitting there going, well, I got this. That must mean that I'm bad. I did something wrong and I'm bad. Because that is the foundation that you've given them to grow up on. You've been good, so only good things will happen to you. But if you've been bad, then bad things happen to you. What are you doing to the soul of this one? Haven't you grown past a point? That child understands that, no, there's nothing that I could have done that's bad. They get to the point, actually I've seen it, where they ask, am I bad? Am I a bad person? Is this why I'm sick? Oh, that tears at your heart. We have little ones, 5 years old, saying, am I bad? That's why God did this to me? No.
Of course no. And how do you break out of that? And the way that you break out of that, of course, the initial thing is exactly what you said, and we saw it many times. Because that falsehood, and it's many ways those hooks go in. They're falsehoods. Is that good? If bad things happen to bad people, that's right from ego. If you're good and all these things, you follow all the rules, then, and you get this immediate dividing line. Well, we felt it ourselves. You get pushed into a box. Well, that must have been from your family or something. That must be because you didn't get the right insurance. You were exposed to something, or it must be genetic, or
you must have done something
right,
bad
because it
for
can't
this
be
to
me,
happen to you.
right? So that is the ego box. That's the helmet we were talking about before. In some ways, How do you get out of that? How do you break out of that? And I want to return back to where we started, which was again this little 3-letter word, now.
Right.
Being in the cancer wards, is the same as sitting, in some ways on that park bench, and except in the cancer wards, it's not nice, it's not beautiful, it's not a great day. Yet, that's that moment of now, and you still have to live through it. Now, you try all the things that society has told you to do. Before, you were sitting on the park bench and it was beautiful and lovely, and you were ignoring the lovely day and just making your own misery. But now misery really is here. This is true misery. This is true suffering. The world, the universe has handed you suffering. And you have the why me. Well, the why me wears out because it doesn't help anything. And you must have done something bad. And you say, well, I didn't do anything bad. Just as Margaret just said, the child, I know I didn't do anything bad. I didn't do anything good. You come to the end of this. You come to this in a very different way. You can come to it sitting on a park bench and realizing it is a beautiful day and I'm making my own suffering. Lovely. Great way to get there. But most people come to it through tremendous suffering, realizing that in the moment of now, all those lies were lies. All the lies being, bad things only happen to bad people. No, bad things happen to everybody. You must have done something. No, this happens purely because it just happens. It just is. It's the moment of now. It's the reality of now. You strip away these things. In fact, they're initially stripped away from you. You get pushed into a box. You get pushed into this little room. It says, this must be just you, because everyone else says, well, I don't want to come, if I get too close, it might get me too. So we'll put you in this box. Say, oh, that's so bad. It's the opposite of compassion. It's sympathy. Oh, it's so terrible to be you. Let me leave now. So you're there in this box. You really are suffering. And the ego seems to say that, there's no way out of this. We must have done something. We must be bad. And you come to the root of it, to the very heart of it, and you realize that all those things were false. All the hooks fall away. They're destroyed in some ways by the suffering. And the breakthrough at that point is in that the moment of now, in all those terrible things that are happening around you, you still are. And there's still joy. Remember the laughter Margaret was talking about before? You laugh in these places. And it's like you're bringing a ray of sunshine into the darkest pit. And people are startled. And almost say to you, well, how can you be enjoying yourself? And I said, because it's funny, or it's just joy. You find in that moment, Margaret, that life still is worth living in the moment of now, and no matter what they say, and no matter what the society and what hooks were in you, you still are.
What it does is it reveals how very precious life is, and all that is happening in that moment. Okay, I can't, there are no words to describe what you wouldn't give for one more day with the one you love, with your child. There are no words. How precious is it to be together in that moment of now, and what you share is something so very deep and so very sacred that it is written on the pages of eternity. You have those moments forever. Your eternity bank, if you would.
Mm.
But that's what it means to be pushed right to the edge. And you realize how precious this moment actually is. We have a tendency to denigrate it. We just avoid. It's like, oh, I always have the moment of now. Let me think about the future.
Exactly.
Or I always have the moment of now. Let me contemplate what I did wrong in the past. That's all illusion. You can't touch it. You can't be there. You can't relive it. You can't rewrite it. Nor can you manipulate things forward. You have now. And now is amazing. because you can reach out and touch another soul and hold them to your heart. And that is an eternal, unconditional love moment that echoes throughout forever.
And you miss it.
Huh?
If you miss it if you don't live in the moment of now.
People are constantly missing it.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what made me crazy. After we had gone through all of this, and I said this to Michael, it took me 2 years to become civil to people because they were constantly living outside of their now. They couldn't see the value of being able to hold their babies. They complained bitterly. Why? Because the kid was complaining about not having the right breakfast or missing the bus. And that was the worst thing that happened. Oh, it's just the worst thing in the world.
The worst thing.
And I'm like, I have got to leave because if I open my mouth right now, I will floor you and rip away all the illusions that you are holding right now.
And they hold them so very dear.
Oh, they hold them dear. And how dare you even say anything to the contrary? But usually it only takes one look, eye to eye, and they could see the fire that's burning within you when you say, you have your baby in front of you. You can hold him. And that's when they remember, oh, she doesn't have hers. She can't hold hers. Oh, and then they run.
Well, and because, again, the ego is fearful of anything that will try to strip away these illusions, because the ego is very comfortable there. But getting there and learning that continues to be the most precious thing that ever happened to us.
Yes.
And
hard though it is, and it's the much more common way. You know, if you get to enlightenment without that, consider yourself incredibly lucky, because most people have to go through horrible suffering, either of their own or of a loved one, to get to the end of themselves, to burn away all these ego illusions, and to realize that you were making your own suffering, that you were counting yourself as special, that you were identifying with all these things, saying, I'm this, I'm that, I'm going to be this. That the moment of now was, as Margaret just said, ignorable, because there's always another one. Right. It's just the arrogance, the immense arrogance that we have as human beings. I found it fascinating to the point of tears. The pain.
Well, and because you could see where you came from. Once you get past this, you break through, and it's very difficult, because the last steps are the worst, because you step into the complete unknown. You step into the complete unknown, and you do nothing but it's a true blind leap of faith into complete. You're basically dissolving an ego and taking a consciousness into a void. Okay. And you find out that that's where the now is. You can't, going back is very difficult. Margaret just said, take 2 years to become civil. But you never actually get all the way back, because you can't.
No, I'm not. I have learned, I have disciplined myself to be civil to people.
Well, because you have compassion. You see others, and you see yourself in others, and you say, you're not ready for the enlightenment. You're not ready for the suffering. You're not ready to go past yourself and into consciousness. And Tolle tries very gently to bring people along. He's a beautiful, lovely, calm, patient man, and he gives these lessons. Says you can do this practice, But within him, he says, but most of you, and he says it once in a while, just says ha 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 in this little German way, but most people come to it through great suffering. Ha ha ha. Yeah, great suffering is unfortunately the way where you finally get to the end of yourself and you finally break through into now and realize that no matter what, now is, and that life is not either suffering or always non-suffering, but it just is, and it has these moments in it, and you have to live every one, and this sounds trite, but it's so terribly, terribly true, as if it's the last one you'll ever get. Because it might be, but not only that, because it's that precious that every moment of now, as Margaret just said, is the moment that you can say, I wish I had that one more now with the person who's no longer here. Yeah. Now, there's many other ways to look at this too. That the relationship still is there. The eternity bank is the eternal moment of now. Once you break through, you realize that there is no loss, truly, and there is no separation, truly. But the incarnation still feels it, because the incarnation is limited. Spirit is what you connect up to. Source is what you break back into. And the other day we were talking about the Theophilos. The Theophilos is to become like unto God. Well, this is what we're here to be, to break back into and out of this time-bound existence and back into the timelessness of now, because now is also eternal. Now is not a moment. Now is forever.
I thought it was to become, you come into God and then you are like God.
And you are, as God is, eternal, and we all are.
Right.
And eternity is also the moment of now, because it is.
Right, but my point being is that you have got to make that, you have to let go, because instead of the ego cannot bring you into that, all right, because that's the interpretation most people do. I'm sitting here and doing this enlightenment stuff, meditating and whatnot, because I'm going to bring myself over there. It's like, you can't.
Right, and totally, and many of the masters say, yes, Buddha said it, I'll show you, yes, you're asking me what, okay, all these things, here's all the rules.
You want the signposts, here are the signposts.
Well, or as you said, living like the Philistines.
Philistines?
Not the Philistines, the Pharisees. Sorry, Philistines, very close. Like the Pharisaical rules. Here's all the rules. Follow all the rules and you'll get there. But you don't get there.
That's all. That is a mental construct,
exactly,
which is part of the man's mind, man's ego.
Right.
And you can't get there.
You can't get to the end of yourself by thinking about it.
Right. My suggestion right now is perhaps to read the quote.
Want me to do it?
Yes.
I rarely get this honor. The quote that we're talking about is from Tolle, and it's from, I believe it's from The Moment of Now. The Power of Now. It's a good one. Nothing has happened in the past. It happened in the now. And nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now. And that is what it encompasses. The moment of now encompasses the whole future and the whole past and eternity. And it's also impossible to hold. It's impossible to realize, to think about. To say this is the moment of now is to miss it. Yet you can't help but live them. And the challenge is to be conscious, not to realize that you're living them, because that's still thinking about it. To be conscious of the moment of now. To be the I am, to use the biblical term, I am who am, is a wonderful way of saying now. I am who am. It's two beings, verbs, in a language which we no longer speak anymore, and which we've translated into this rather weird sounding phrase, but it just means be. God, the word, my name, is being. And being encompasses everything. Being is.
Yes. Is.
And it doesn't translate well into language.
No.
It sounds weird. I am who I am. I be.
Well, the problem is with language, it has a tendency to objectify everything. Because you're looking at being, and it is what is. But what is an object? You know, what object are you talking about? It's like, no. No.
Totally has a great way of putting it. The isness of now. It's another, it just kind of tugs at, it makes your brain hurt. What do you mean by the isness of now? Just the isness.
Well, this is why in the Buddhist tradition, they were always giving koans out to confuse people, to make them get so confused they stop thinking.
And the famous one is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Well, there is no sound, but there is a sound. Well, wait a minute. Brain hurt. Ah. Oh, good. You're in the being moment. Your brain hurts and it turned off.
Well, it's, I believe Tolle's accomplishment that he feels is the best accomplishment he's ever done is he can actually turn off thinking.
I think we have to turn off thinking right now. We have reached the end of the hour, I think.
Yes, we have.
And the being in us says, now is the time.
All right. So I am Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
Thank you for listening.